I never thought I'd become a business owner at 29, especially not because of my own wedding. My name is Emma Collins, and 6 months ago, I was just another bride-to-be in Chicago, excitedly planning what should have been the happiest day of my life. The Lakeside Manor is perfect, I had told my fiancé, Michael, as we toured the elegant venue overlooking Lake Michigan. The historic building with its sweeping staircases and crystal chandeliers had been my dream since I was a little girl growing up in suburban Illinois. The venue's owner, Richard Blackwood, had the practiced charm of someone who'd spent decades in the hospitality industry. "We're booking 18 months out, so you'll need to put down a non-refundable deposit of $15,000 to secure your date," he explained, sliding the contract across his mahogany desk. Michael squeezed my hand. "Whatever makes you happy, Em." I dipped into my savings, money I'd been setting aside since my first job at 16, and wrote the check. The date was set, June 12, 2025. I spent the next several months coordinating with vendors, selecting flowers, choosing the perfect menu. My mother flew in from Arizona to help with dress shopping. My best friend, Sophia, organized a Pinterest board of inspiration. Everything was falling into place. Then came my bridal shower 3 months before the wedding. It was a beautiful spring afternoon, hosted at Sophia's apartment. Champagne flowed, gifts piled up, and laughter filled the room as my closest friends and family celebrated. I was in the kitchen refilling my glass when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. "You don't deserve this," Sophia's cousin Melissa was saying to someone on her phone. "Richard is closing the venue next month and keeping all the deposits. Emma has no idea." My hand froze mid-pour. Melissa worked part-time at the Lakeside Manor's accounting office, a detail I'd forgotten until that moment. "Yeah, he's done it before," she continued, unaware I was listening. "Sells the property, pockets the deposits, and disappears. The new owners aren't honoring any of the bookings." I set down my glass, champagne forgotten. The room suddenly felt too hot, too small. $15,000, gone. My dream venue, gone. And no one had bothered to tell me. I slipped out of the kitchen and into Sophia's bedroom, closing the door behind me. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and started Googling. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Richard. Blackwood had been involved in similar situations in Detroit and Cleveland. Each time he'd left dozens of brides without venues and without their money. The next morning, instead of calling Richard, which I knew would be pointless, I called my bank, then my lawyer, then a real estate agent who specialized in commercial properties. "The Lakeside Manor is being sold?" I asked the agent, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, it's not public yet, but the listing goes live next week. The owner wants a quick sale. He's asking below market value." "How much?" I asked. When she told me the price, I nearly laughed. It was a lot of money, of course, $1.2 million, but not as much as I'd expected for such a prime piece of Chicago real estate. My years working as a financial analyst had taught me to recognize a good investment when I saw one. I spent the next week in a frenzy of activity. I liquidated my investment portfolio. I called my parents, who agreed to loan me part of their retirement savings. I approached my boss, who had always been impressed with my work, and convinced her to become a silent partner. I secured a business loan, leveraging my excellent credit score and detailed business plan. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Richard Blackwood once again, this time in his lawyer's office. He didn't recognize me at first. I was just another potential buyer to him, another mark. When I slid my counteroffer across the table, his eyes widened slightly. "You're offering the full asking price, with no inspection period?" his lawyer asked, clearly surprised. I nodded. "I'm familiar with the property." "Have we met?" Richard asked, finally studying my face. I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. I'm Emma Collins. I put down a $15,000 non-refundable deposit for my wedding on June 12th. The color drained from his face. "I believe you're planning to close the venue and keep my deposit, along with those of about 30 other couples," I continued calmly. "But I've decided to change the narrative." 2 hours later, I walked out of that office as the new owner of the Lakeside Manor. I had drained nearly every financial resource I had, taken on significant debt, and completely upended my life. But I had saved my wedding venue, and not just for myself. That evening, I made 30 phone calls, one to each couple who had booked the Lakeside Manor. I introduced myself as the new owner and assured them that their events would proceed as planned. The relief and gratitude in their voices was overwhelming. The last call I made was to Michael. "We need to talk," I said. "I just bought a wedding venue." "You did what?" Michael's voice cracked as we sat in our small apartment that evening. His expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked unsettlingly like disapproval. "I bought the Lakeside Manor," I repeated, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Our venue. The one where we're getting married. In 3 months." "With what money?" he asked, his voice unnaturally quiet. I explained my financial maneuvers, the liquidated investments, the loan from my parents, the partnership with my boss, the bank loan. With each detail, Michael's face grew more closed off. "So, you've emptied our savings and put yourself in debt for what? Revenge?" he finally asked. "It's not revenge," I insisted. "It's business, and it's the right thing to do. There are 30 couples who would have lost everything. And what about us, Emma? What about our future? Our plans to buy a house next year? Start a family?" I hadn't expected this reaction. In my mind, I was the hero of this story, saving the day, saving our wedding, making a smart business investment. I hadn't considered that Michael might see it differently. "This changes everything," he said, getting up from the couch. "I need some time to think." He grabbed his keys and left. I sat alone in our apartment, surrounded by wedding planning binders and sample invitations, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The next morning, I woke up alone. Michael had spent the night at his brother's place. I put on a pot of coffee, opened my laptop, and started working. If I was going to run a wedding venue, I needed to learn how, and fast. My first day as a venue owner was a baptism by fire. I arrived at the Lakeside Manor at 7 a.m., armed with coffee and determination. The staff had no idea their boss had sold the business. I had the uncomfortable task of introducing myself as their new employer. The event coordinator, Jasmine, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, regarded me with skepticism. "So you just bought the place?" she asked, arms crossed. "Yes," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. Richard Blackwood was planning to close the venue and keep all the deposits, including mine. Something shifted in her expression. "That explains a lot," she said slowly. "He's been cutting corners for months, telling us to double book dates, then cancel the lower-paying events last minute, making us substitute cheaper ingredients in the kitchen without telling clients." Over the next several hours, Jasmine brought me up to speed on the venue's operations and its problems. The roof leaked in 3 places. The ancient HVAC system broke down regularly. The head chef was threatening to quit because of bounced paychecks. "Why do you stay?" I asked her as we toured the property. She smiled wryly. "I've been planning weddings for 20 years. I love making people's dreams come true, even when the owner is a nightmare." By the end of that first week, I had a clear picture of what I'd gotten myself into. The Lakeside Manor wasn't just a venue with a dishonest owner. It was a business, on the brink of collapse. Richard had been extracting every penny while investing nothing back into the property or its staff. Meanwhile, my personal life was in shambles. Michael had returned to our apartment but was sleeping on the couch. Our wedding plans sat in limbo. We still had a date and a venue, but the joy had been sucked out of the planning. I don't understand why you couldn't just find another venue, he said one night over a silent dinner. Because it wasn't just about our wedding, I tried to explain. It was about doing what's right, about not letting someone like Richard keep getting away with hurting people. Michael shook his head. You always need to be the one to fix everything, don't you? Even when it's not your responsibility. His words stung because there was truth in them. I'd always been the fixer, the one who couldn't walk away from problems. It was what made me good at my finance job. I saw issues others missed and resolved them before they became crises. But this was different. This was bigger than a spreadsheet error or a budget discrepancy. This was people's dreams, their memories, their hard-earned money. As April turned to May, I threw myself into revitalizing the lakeside manor. I worked with contractors to fix the leaky roof and update the aging electrical system. I hired a new head chef who specialized in farm-to-table cuisine. I implemented a transparent booking system that clients could access online. Each improvement ate into my dwindling funds, but I could see the venue coming back to life. The gardens were replanted with vibrant spring flowers. The grand ballroom's hardwood floors were refinished to a warm glow. The lakeside deck was reinforced and expanded to accommodate sunset ceremonies. Jasmine became my right hand. Her initial skepticism transformed into determined collaboration. You know, she told me one evening as we finalized the weekend's events, I've worked for 4 different owners here. You're the first one who actually cares about the place. The first wedding under my ownership was scheduled for the second weekend in May. It was for a couple named Taylor and Aiden, who had been planning their day for over a year. I can't believe how different everything looks, Taylor marveled during their final walkthrough. When we booked, this place was beautiful but a little worn. Now it's... She gestured at the freshly painted walls, the new lighting fixtures, the immaculate grounds. Magical. Aiden finished for her, squeezing her hand. I felt a pang of both pride and sadness. This was what I wanted for my own wedding, that sense of magic, of everything being perfect. But Michael and I had barely spoken about our plans. In weeks. Our June date was approaching, but it felt like we were drifting further apart. The night of Taylor and Aiden's wedding, I stood in the back of the ballroom, watching as they shared their first dance. The lights twinkled overhead. The band played softly, and the happy couple moved as one across the floor, lost in each other's eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. We need to talk about our wedding, about us. As I looked up from my phone, I caught Jasmine watching me. Everything okay, boss? She asked. I took a deep breath. I don't know, I answered honestly. But right now, let's make sure this wedding is perfect. And it was. Every detail went off without a hitch. The food was delicious, the service impeccable, the dance floor packed until the early hours. When Taylor and Aiden left amid a shower of rose petals, their faces glowed with joy. Later that night, as the cleaning crew worked around me, I sat, alone at a table in the empty ballroom, surrounded by the remnants of someone else's perfect day. I picked up my phone and texted Michael back. I'll be home soon. We can talk then. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. Buying the lakeside manor had changed me. I couldn't go back to being the person I was before. The person who followed the expected path, who didn't take risks, who didn't fight back when wronged. For better or worse, I had found my calling. Now I just needed to figure out if there was still room in my new life for the future I'd planned with Michael. The conversation with Michael that night ended our engagement. I don't recognize you anymore, Emma, he said, his voice more sad than angry. The woman I proposed to wouldn't have gambled our future on some crusade. I could have argued that it wasn't a gamble but an investment. I could have pointed out that the Lakeside Manor was already booking new events at a rapid pace, that the business had potential he couldn't see. But sitting across from him in our apartment, still full of half-packed wedding gifts and unaddressed invitations, I realized something important. He was right. I wasn't the same woman he'd proposed to a year ago. that Emma would have cried over the lost deposit, found another venue, and moved on. That Emma wouldn't have risked everything on a bold move that changed the trajectory of her life. "I'm sorry," I said simply. "I didn't mean for this to happen." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I know. But it did." We spent the next week disentangling our lives, canceling vendors, returning gifts, notifying guests. I moved out of our apartment and into a small room above the Lakeside Manor's office, telling myself it was temporary, just until I found a new place. June 12th, what should have been our wedding day, arrived with perfect weather. Clear blue skies, a gentle breeze off the lake, temperatures in the mid-70s. The kind of day brides dream about. I spent it overseeing another couple's celebration, pasting on a professional smile while ignoring the ache in my chest. At the end of the night, after everyone had gone, I kicked off my heels and walked down to the lake's edge. I sat on the wooden dock, dangling my feet above the water, and finally allowed myself to cry. "Thought I might find you here," came Jasmine's voice behind me. She sat down beside me, offering a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. This was from the Miller wedding. They left it behind. She poured us each a glass. "To new beginnings," she said, lifting hers in a toast. I managed a watery smile. "To new beginnings." We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the moonlight ripple across the lake's surface. "You know," Jasmine said eventually, "I've seen hundreds of weddings. The perfect ones, the disasters, the ones where the bride and groom are clearly making a mistake." She glanced at me. "The wedding isn't the important part. It's what comes after that matters." I nodded, taking another sip of champagne. "I'm starting to understand that." As summer progressed into fall, the Lakeside Manor flourished under my direction. Word spread about the venue's renaissance, the exceptional service, the renovated facilities, the new owner who had rescued it from a notorious scammer. Bookings increased, reviews glowed, and gradually, the business began to turn a profit. I repaid my parents first, then started chipping away at the business loan. I hired more staff, including an assistant for Jasmine and a social media manager who transformed our online presence. I moved out of the makeshift bedroom above the office and into a small but charming apartment nearby. In October, I received an unexpected email from a producer at a popular Chicago morning show. They wanted to feature the Lakeside Manor in a segment about local businesses with interesting origin stories. "You should do it," Jasmine urged when I hesitated. "Your story could help other people avoid scammers like Richard." The interview aired on a crisp autumn morning. I watched from the venue's office as the segment played, cringing slightly at seeing myself on screen, but proud of how the manor looked, stunning in the golden fall light, its gardens ablaze with autumn colors. "So, Emma," the interviewer asked, on screen, "what would you say to other young entrepreneurs thinking of taking a similar leap?" My on-screen self paused thoughtfully before answering. I'd say, sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to where we're supposed to be. I didn't plan to own a wedding venue at 29. I planned to get married in one, but life had other ideas. By that afternoon, my phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. The segment had gone viral, shared across social media with headlines like "Bride buys wedding venue after owner tries to scam her," and "Woman turns wedding heartbreak into business success." The publicity brought a flood of new inquiries, not just for weddings, but for corporate events, charity galas, and other functions. It also brought something unexpected: stories from other victims of venue scams across the country, reaching out to share their experiences and ask for advice. "You should write a guide," suggested my new marketing director, a vibrant woman named Priya, who had previously worked for a major hotel chain. "How to avoid wedding venue scams. We could publish it on our website, offer it free to couples. It..." would be great PR and genuinely helpful. That guide became my passion project through the winter months. I researched venue scams nationwide, consulted with lawyers about contract red flags, and compiled a comprehensive resource for couples. When we published it in January, it was downloaded thousands of times in the first week alone. 1 year after, buying the lakeside manor, I stood in the same spot where I'd first fallen in love with the venue. The grand staircase had been refinished, the chandeliers cleaned to a brilliant sparkle, but the essence of the place remained the same. It was still magical, still the perfect backdrop for life's most precious moments. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Bride having pre-ceremony jitters in the suite. Could use your touch." I made my way to the bridal suite, where a young woman in a stunning white gown was pacing nervously. "Lauren," I said gently. "I'm Emma, the owner. Is everything okay?" She turned to me, eyes wide. "What if I'm making a mistake? What if this changes everything?" I smiled, remembering my own fears from what seemed like a lifetime ago. "It will change everything," I told her honestly. "But sometimes, that's exactly what we need." I helped her adjust her veil, calm her breathing, and find her center. 20 minutes later, I watched from the back as she walked confidently down the aisle toward her future. That night, after the last guest had departed and the cleaning crew had finished, I sat at my desk reviewing the week's events. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting Jasmine with a last-minute question. Instead, it was Michael. I hadn't seen him since we'd divided our possessions almost a year ago. "Hi, Emma," he said, looking both familiar and like a stranger at the same time. "Michael," I replied, surprised. "What are you doing here?" He glanced around the office, at the awards on the wall, the busy calendar, the framed copy of the magazine that had recently featured the Lakeside Manor in its Best of Chicago issue. "I saw you on the news a few months ago," he said. "You looked happy. I just wanted to see for myself." I nodded, unsure what to say. "You were right," he continued, meeting my eyes. "About this place, about what Richard was doing. I should have supported you." "Thank you," I said softly. "But I understand why you didn't. It was a crazy thing to do." He smiled slightly. "It was brave. I just couldn't see it then." We talked for a while longer, about his new job, my growing business, mutual friends. There was no rekindling of romance, no dramatic reconciliation. Just two people who had once planned a future together, now moving forward on separate paths. After he left, I walked through the quiet venue, turning off lights as I went. In the grand ballroom, I paused, remembering how I'd once imagined my own reception here, the music, the dancing, the toast Michael and I would share. The reality had turned out differently. There had been no wedding, no honeymoon, no beginning of the married life I'd planned. Instead, there had been challenge, growth, and the unexpected joy of creating something meaningful from what could have been merely a painful experience. I stepped out onto the lakeside deck, breathing in the cool night air. Chicago's skyline glittered across the water, a constellation of lights against the darkness. Tomorrow would bring another wedding, another chance to help create perfect memories for someone else. But tonight belonged to me, to reflect on the journey that had brought me here, to this place that had broken my heart, and then healed it in ways I never could have imagined. "You don't deserve this," Melissa had said that day at my bridal shower, unaware I was listening. She'd been right, but not in the way she'd meant. I hadn't deserved to be scammed, to lose my deposit, to have my wedding dreams shattered. But perhaps I had deserved something else, the chance to discover my own strength, to build something meaningful, to find purpose in helping others avoid the pain I'd experienced. As I locked up the Lakeside Manor that night, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I'd found exactly where I was meant to be.